Look around the room. How many females are here? This is such an opportunity that is unique. She gave you so much information. She gave you ideas on how to better approach this market if you're not already. As she said, find the one thing you're going to do. So important. If you noticed, you paid attention, Lori had a little slip up, and she gave this statistic. She said 90% of women are going to control their husbands at some point.
No, that's not right.
She quickly corrected herself.
That's not
But I
right.
couldn't help but notice, Lori. Yeah, it might be higher than 90. That's right. That's right. One last time, give it up for Lori Seaton. Our next speaker is from National Life Group, and what's funny to me about this industry, something I learned a long time ago when I first got started, is that we have to wear a lot of different hats, don't we? You know, one day we're an insurance agent, the next day we're like a couples counselor, right? We're working with a married couple, trying to work with them on their finances. And sometimes we have to play the part of attorney. Now be careful, because you're not licensed attorneys unless you are. But you will get questions like, hey, do I need a trust? What's a power of attorney? How do these things work? And while none of you need to be able to draft these documents, you should have a basic understanding of how they work. You should be able to answer these types of questions, because there are times where when you're working with clients, it's part of their plan. And by a show of hands, who in here has children? Almost everybody. John? Did you forget whether you have kids? My point is this, if you raise your hand, you need estate planning. It's not optional, especially if those children are minors. And your clients who have kids, they need estate planning too. And estate planning doesn't always mean, I'm worth $25 million and I need this trust and that trust. Anyone who has children or has assets probably needs some sort of estate plan. So to help us with this, from the National Life Group Assistant Vice President of Advanced Markets, Matt Ryan.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
Great to be with you all, FFS here in Atlanta on this snowy morning. I was going to say this at the end, but if you have any questions, you can say them. I will be here for the next couple of days, it looks like, my place. So feel free to reach out to me. But as Jay indicated, I want to talk to you about estate planning for everyone. Who here, show of hands, who here has an estate plan or knows what an estate plan is? Okay, that's probably about a quarter of the room. When I talk about estate plans, what I'm talking about is not necessarily, hey, I need liquidity because when I pass away, my whole state, federal estate tax or a state death tax, right? I'm talking about getting the right assets to the right people, right, at the right time in the right way. That's what I'm talking about. How many in this room, you're all in this room because you solve solutions for your clients, right? You bring them solutions, you solve their problem, right? So in my world, that is called adding value. You add value, right? Everybody, okay, your competitors do exactly what you do, right? They sell annuities, they sell securities, they sell life insurance, right? And how you separate yourself from everybody else is by adding more value. How many in this room, right, talk to a client when they sell an annuity or they sell them a life insurance, particularly policy? How many in this room talk to them about beneficiary designations, the importance of naming your beneficiary designations, reviewing your beneficiary designations over time, right? I see people shaking their head, right? How many talk about the ownership of that life insurance policy? Because I deal with a lot of people a lot of times who are selling large amounts of life insurance, and what happens is they don't think that they have an estate tax issue today, right? Either on the state level or on a federal level. They don't have an estate issue today, all right? Because maybe their net worth is only $7 million or $6 million, but they sold them that $5 million or that $7 million life insurance policy, and they are named the owner of that life insurance policy. You know what happens when that person passes away? That life insurance policy, that death benefit, is included in the value of their estate for estate tax purposes. That can cause a lot of issues. So that individual, my example, if they were worth $7 million, you sold them a $5 million life insurance policy, they owned it, they pass away, their estate is worth $12 million. You just potentially created an estate tax issue for them. All right? I also have another friend, and again, it's not just about the value of your estate, it's about making sure the right assets get to the right people in the right way. I have a friend that just recently put his mother in a care facility, and she was suffering from dementia. However, she didn't do any estate planning. It took over a month for them to put their mother in a care facility. And the reason why was because they didn't have any control over their assets. There was no power of attorney. They couldn't make decisions for them. So when they called up the doctors, right, and wanted to talk about their mother, they couldn't do that. And the reason why they couldn't do that is because they didn't have a power of attorney. There's no healthcare directors, right? When you want to add value to your clients, sure, solving their problems for their retirement, if they're business owners, or their employees, or their succession plan, that's all great. You should be doing that. But if you want to add really true value, is start talking to them after you sell them or give them that solution. Ask them about whether or not they have an estate plan. Right? Because it can cause huge problems if you don't have it. And you know what? You're not going to realize it until it actually happens to you. And then it's too late. Right? So I want to talk to you about some strategies that you can use with your clients when you're talking about estate planning.
Sorry, everyone, his mic keeps going in and out, so we're gonna go ahead and switch over this real quick.
Okay, very good. Okay, I have a loud voice anyway, so. In the back, you can hear me? Yes. Very good. Much better, okay. So, basic estate planning is nothing more than these pillars, right? Financial powers of attorney, healthcare powers of attorney, advanced healthcare directives, wills, revocable trusts, and life insurance. There are some uses of life insurance in estate planning. Remember, you don't necessarily have to be rich in order to do estate planning. Use life insurance. Life insurance can do a lot of things. So, for instance, life insurance can be used to pay those final expenses when somebody passes away. If you've had a relative, right, or a mother or father who's passed away recently or in the past, I can tell you from firsthand experience, it's very expensive to bury a parent. Right? And if they didn't do the proper planning, right, the question is, how are you going to come up with the money in order to pay for that funeral? Right? It's very, very expensive. You know, there's outstanding bills that need to be paid as well. So having a life insurance policy is a great way to create that liquidity in order to pay for those events. Other uses of life insurance, you know, again, for liquidity for estate tax purposes, you can use that for that. Also, it's for those individuals who have done a really good job of securing their retirement because you've helped them secure their retirement. And they want that permission slip to spend down their retirement assets, right? But they also want to leave a legacy for their children. And how do you do that? Well, life insurance is a great vehicle in order to accomplish that. Because if you did a really good job of helping that individual save for the retirement, whether that's 20 years, 30 years, or 40 years, for that gentleman looks like, because it's got longevity in his family, right? That is a great way to use life insurance, right? To have the permission slip to spend down those retirement assets in your qualified plans, in your IRA, right, in your pension plans, to spend those down while leaving a legacy for your children, right? That's a great way to use life insurance in estate planning. So here's a question for you all. Why don't people actually do the estate planning? Raise your hand if you have an answer. Cost. Correct. What else? They're looking for what? They don't want to confront reality, right? They don't want to face their own death and their own demise.
They think they don't have any asset. They don't have the need to do
They
it.
think they don't have any assets, right? They don't need to do it because, you know, the federal exemption, we're going to talk about in a second, is about $14 million, $13.99 million, right? They don't need to do the estate plan. Wrong. What are the reasons? No education. There's a couple of studies that I've been reading recently. Merrill Lynch had one, and had a list of the number of reasons why people aren't doing it. You jumped on a couple of those. One of them was the expense. It's expensive. But the biggest one was control. Right? People don't want to lose control. When you start talking to them about creating trusts, right, irrevocable trusts, right, and you're putting a life insurance policy inside that irrevocable trust, that's when you're removing that from their estate, right? But you're also removing it from their control. They no longer have access to the cash surrender values of those policies if they need them. They no longer have access to those living benefits if they need them. Okay? So, how do we overcome that and actually provide value to the client? How do we overcome the control issue that a client might have, right, when you're selling them a life insurance policy? Well, on this spectrum down here, you know, you see the middle America, you see emerging markets, and you see affluent clients. You see some of the strategies above, okay, and things that people want to do in terms of protecting your family, increasing your wealth, and transfer the wealth. I'm going to talk to you about some of these strategies. Legacy IRA, irrevocable life insurance trust, standby survivorship trust, and spousal lifetime access trust, because these are very important. I know there was an election that just happened, right, 2024, right? There was a change in the executive leadership of our country. There was a change in our legislature, right? And I will not tell you what party I affiliate with, because it really doesn't matter to me. As I tell my entire team every year, every election cycle, it doesn't matter who wins. Because you know what happens when change occurs? When one party comes in, change occurs, right? And when change occurs, who needs your help? Your clients. Your clients need your help, right? So you have to be aware of what those changes are, how they're going to impact your clients. And it's a great excuse to reach out to those individuals and start having the conversation. So in my book, it doesn't matter Republican, Democrat, progressive, liberal, conservative, it doesn't matter who's in control, because whoever's in control is going to make changes, and that's going to create some circumstances where you're going to be able to have to get in front of your clients to have conversations to talk to them about that. Now, I don't know what's going to happen. I do know that in 2026, at the end of this year, there is the sunset, right? Everybody in this room has heard the sunset, right?
Yes.
Okay, there's a lot of things that are going to be rolled back, all right? Standard deductions, all right, are going to come down. You're going to be able to itemize, right? Personal income tax rates, the highest bracket is going to go up from 37 to 39.6. Okay, the 199A small business deduction is going to go away, right? You're still going to have the C corporations with the 21% tax rate, but those pass-through entities now are not going to have the advantage of that 199A small business deduction. Okay, there's going to be a lot of changes that occur. Now, some people think that, hey, listen, don't worry about it because the Republicans control Congress now, and they're going to pass some bills, right? I don't know. There's a pretty thin margin in the House, right? I don't know what's going to happen. I don't believe anybody in this room really knows what's going to happen. I don't think the people talking on TV really know what's going to happen. Okay? We just don't. All I do know is there's going to be some change. All right? We may get to the sunset, we may not. And I think there's going to be some trade-offs. But the point is that if your clients aren't doing anything because they think there's going to be some really good change that they're going to take advantage of, well, it's kind of like you guys are in the business of selling life insurance, right? I know I'm going to pass away, I just don't know when. Right? Should I wait to buy my life insurance policy? Right? When I get closer to my demise, right? I'm not going to do that. What's the prudent thing to do? It's to buy the life insurance today because you need the protection. It's the same thing with estate planning. Don't listen to your client by saying, hey, listen, we don't know what's going to happen. I'd rather wait until something happens and then do the plan. No, don't wait. Do it now. Because you don't know what those changes are going to be. You know, the exemption's $13.99 billion. People think that maybe they'll keep it the same. All right? Well, it's scheduled to go down to $7 million at the end of 2025. So there's going to be a lot of people that didn't do their planning. If it does go down, they're going to find themselves with a large estate tax issue. So how can you help them? Again, as I mentioned, $13.99 million. That's the new federal state tax gets exemption. It's going to go down to about adjusted to inflation 2026, it's going to be $5 million right, prior to 2017, but it's gonna be adjusted to inflation. It's probably gonna land somewhere around $7 million if that actually occurs. And incidentally, you know, there might be some passages of new legislation that's gonna address this and address taxes and small businesses, but there's gonna be some trade-offs because there's not gonna be what we call legislation where the House is gonna vote, okay, the majority on the bill, and then the Senate is gonna get 60 votes. That's not gonna happen. The Republicans only have 53 members, right? They're not gonna get to the 60. So, you know what's gonna be passed is reconciliation. And reconciliation is nothing more than just a budget gimmick, right? And it's gonna expire at some later point in time. But there's a lot of things that they have to negotiate. And I don't know whether or not this is going to be one of those things that they're gonna be negotiating. There might be other important things that they want, okay, in need. And they might say, hey, listen, the 13.99 million, we're good with letting it expire. Okay, because we're gonna get everything else that we want. We don't know what's gonna happen. So you see on the spectrum, on the left-hand side, well, if you're facing it left-hand side, less control and more control, okay? Now, these strategies, like irrevocable life insurance trust, putting a life insurance policy inside of that, okay, to provide liquidity for estate tax purposes, or to protect your kids from their creditors, right, whether they have bad habits, right? Those work with less control. People are less willing to do those because they don't want to lose control over those assets during their lifetime. Because you never know. Something might happen again, another pandemic, right? Something might impact them financially, like these fires in California, or small business owners, right, impacting them, right? They might have to start dipping into their savings or their life insurance policy. If they put it inside an irrevocable life insurance trust, they can't do that. They can't do that, right? So that's one reason why they might not want to do planning for that. We'll talk about spousal lifetime access trusts. They've always been around, but it seems like the last 2 years, a lot of people have been talking about them. Standby survivorship trust, and then personally owned life insurance, right? So let's talk about the first strategy, standby survivorship trust. This is actually a really great flexible strategy to implement for those individuals that are looking for some flexibility and access to their money during their lifetime because they don't know what's going to happen, but also do the planning so that when the first spouse dies, the second spouse, okay, is protected and we reduce their estate, okay, from a valuation standpoint. It's nothing more than having the owner of a survivorship policy, okay, on one spouse. That's typically going to be the spouse that has the shortest life expectancy. Now, if everything's equal, everybody's healthy, who is that going to be? Right? We just saw some statistics up here about people passing away in there, right? And it's typically going to be the man, but it could be the woman if they have a health issue, right? But you want to have the person with the shortest life expectancy owning the life insurance policy. You also want to create a trust, okay? This is a trust, more like a credit shelter trust, in which the second spouse is going to be the trustee and the beneficiary. And the children are going to be the contingent beneficiaries of that trust. And you're going to draft that trust, or the attorney's going to draft that trust. We're going to execute it, we're going to put it in place, but there's nothing going to be in it at this point in time. Because the owner of that survivorship policy is the first spouse. The contingent owner of that survivorship policy is this trust. So when it happens, when Tom dies, the spouse, all right, that survivorship policy, in this case was a $2 million policy, option B, it was increasing when he was funding it. That is now going to be owned by that standby survivorship trust when Tom passes away. Whoop, let me go back. Okay, and at that point in time, because Tom does have an estate, right? When he passes away, we have to file an estate tax return. And when we do that, we have to include that life insurance policy, right? That he owned. But it's not the death benefit. What it is, it's going to be the cash surrender value of that life insurance policy. That's what's going to be included in his estate. But because he's married, he has a spouse, unlimited marital deduction, we just pass everything to the spouse, and there's no estate tax. Okay? But in this case, that survivorship policy is actually going to be owned by that trust for the benefit of his spouse. The results is that you're providing control and flexibility during your lifetime. Because during your lifetime, what do they have access to? They have access to the cash surrender value. Okay? Clients may access the accumulated value. The premiums for the survivorship are generally smaller, right, than a single life insurance policy. And you have the potential to avoid the state tax on the second spouse's death, because now it's removed from that second spouse's estate, right? But that second spouse, remember, is the beneficiary of that trust. It is the trustee. They have control, right? They have access to that. Right? So it's a simple planning, estate planning strategy for those individuals that don't want to necessarily give up control during their lifetime, but actually start doing some estate planning today. The advantages, again, control, flexibility. Disadvantages are what happens if the spouse actually owns the life insurance, passes away early, right? Or was the first, is the survivor, right? The other spouse that is the beneficiary of the trust passes away first. Well, yes, that puts a kink in it, but it's something that can be corrected, okay? Because you can then create another irrevocable trust if they do have an estate tax issue, and then that spouse would then just gift that policy to that trust and use some of their $13.99 million in order to do so, and remove it from their estate. Okay? So, while it might have a disadvantage, it can be overcome. Any questions on this? Has anybody done this strategy for their client? No. Simple strategy, really simple. It does involve actually drafting some documents. As Jay mentioned before, started talking about attorneys. I am an attorney. I don't practice. I can't draft fees, right? So you're going to have to work with the client's attorney. If your client doesn't have an attorney, then you're going to have to look for one, okay? And I would advise any agent out there, right, that's providing these services to their clients to have a team for themselves, right? A CPA that they can trust, okay, with their clients. An attorney that they can trust with their clients, okay? Somebody in your community. Build your team up so that when you're going to your client and seeing your client and providing them solutions, you have the way to execute on those solutions as well. Really important. If you don't have it, start having those conversations with those people. So let's talk about spousal lifetime access trust. Like I said, question, go ahead.
On the last slide, you were saying that the trust is the first beneficiary, the standby trust is the first beneficiary.
The standby trust is the contingent owner of that life insurance policy. So when the first spouse passes away, the owner of that policy is going to be this trust that we created for the benefit of the surviving spouse and the children.
Is this only for irrevocable trust versus revocable trust?
This trust that's created, the standby survivorship trust, it's an irrevocable trust. During the lifetime of the spouse who owns the policy, there is no trust, okay, that's owning that life insurance policy. The only trust that was created was that irrevocable standby survivorship trust for the benefit of the other spouse in the event that the first spouse passes away. Okay? Because they have access, they want to have access to that life insurance policy during their lifetimes. Sure, so the question for everybody in the back was, if this trust is created, would there be language in there that if you had minor children that weren't the age of majority, that would address that issue where it wouldn't give that to them outright? And yes, each trust document would have to be drafted by an attorney that knows what they're doing. And if there were children as beneficiaries, if they were doing their job, they would ask them, okay, how old are they today, right? In the event that something happens between now and the time they reach age of majority, how would you like distribution of those assets? In a standby trust, think of it as a credit shelter trust, right? It's really for the benefit of the surviving spouse, right? And so they have access to the principal and the income during their lifetime. Typically, there's not going to be any distributions to children. It's only going to be to the surviving spouse. And at the death of the surviving spouse, the contingent beneficiaries of that trust are the children. Right? And then there will be some dispositive language in that trust that the attorney will work with the client on to determine, okay, when the second spouse passes away, what about those funds in there for the children? Are they gonna be distributed out to them outright to make their own decisions? Or maybe some of them aren't financially, successful or astute, and they don't want them to have access, so we'll keep it in there, and we'll give the discretion to the trustee to make distributions for their health, education, maintenance, and support. Great question. Question here. What would I recommend? An irrevocable trust or a revocable trust? Well, first of all, I can't practice law, so I can't recommend anything. But if you just asked me about this, we had a conversation outside, I would say it all depends on what you're trying to do. All right? If you're trying to remove that asset from your estate, so it's not included in the value of your estate, all right, then I would say irrevocable. If you're talking about not worrying about the value of it, then I would say revocable, because I have access, I have control over that, I can change it at any point in time. Good question. Any other ones before I jump ahead to spousal lifetime access trust? Okay, spousal lifetime access trust has been around for a long time. I really haven't heard it being talked about until, like I said, about 2 years ago. And the reason why it hasn't been talked about is because the exemptions were so low that we didn't really need to do this, or there was other estate planning strategies that clients could implement that could overcome some of these, but none of them really address the issue of flexibility and control over those assets. So this is where a spousal lifetime access trust is great. And it is irrevocable. It is not revocable. It's irrevocable. How many in this room, let me ask this. Now, as I mentioned, $13.99 million is the federal estate tax exemption, right? So if your estate is less than that, nothing to worry about if you die today. I don't know what it's going to be in 2026. It could be $7 million. So if you have $13 million today, you're good. But if you pass away after the sunset, you have an estate tax issue, right? How many in this room live in a state that has an estate tax? There's about 13, right? New York, Massachusetts, Illinois, okay? Not only do those residents have to pay a federal estate tax if their estate value from a federal standpoint is about $13.99 million, but they also have to pay their state's estate tax. And typically, those are a lot lower. 2 million, $1 million, okay, valuations, okay? The rate in which you have to pay on the federal level is upwards of 40%. On the state levels, it's a little lower. It could be 10%, it could be 15%, but that's 10, 15% that you can avoid paying if you just set that policy up in a way that will protect them in an irrevocable trust, okay? But a spousal lifetime access trust is nothing more than spouse creating a trust, irrevocable trust for their spouse, okay? In this case, June, the wife, is creating a trust for the benefit of her husband, Michael, all right? And she's gonna put a life insurance policy inside of that, and she's gonna fund it. She's gonna annually gift $57,000 a year for 12 years, right, to fund for that life insurance policy that's in that spousal lifetime access trust for the benefit of her husband, Michael. Okay? And the premiums are gonna be used to pay for that life insurance policy. It's gonna be $1 million, and it's gonna be option based, so it's gonna be growing in value each year she makes those. And when she passes away at the age of 80, there's gonna be $3.8 million in that trust for the benefit of Michael, okay, that he can use, and when Michael passes away, for the children. But here's the thing, during June's life, June has indirect access to those proceeds. How? Because she's married to Tom. All right? And Tom is the beneficiary. So Tom can take out distributions of that trust for the benefit of both him and his wife. All right? Now, Tom could actually set up a spousal lifetime access trust for the benefit of June as well. You need to have a really good estate planning attorney in order to do this, because those trusts can't be the same. There's this doctrine and legal doctrine called reciprocity. right? If both of them are the same, the IRS will take a look at that and say, yeah, you guys are trying to circumvent the rules here, that's included in your estate, right? But a good drafting attorney will make those documents a little bit different, all right? And you don't want to do them on the same day. You want to fund them on different days. It actually makes it even better if you end up like in December, setting up one in December, and then waiting for the year to change and setting up the other one, all right? In the eyes of the IRS, they kind of like that, and it's a little tougher for them to overcome that burden that we didn't do this to circumvent anything. But this is a great planning strategy for those individuals, again, that need life insurance, large amounts, but they don't want to own it because you're now going to create an estate tax issue for them. But they want that life insurance because they want access to the living benefits. They want access to the cash surrender values during your lifetime because they don't know what's going to happen. But they don't want that policy to be included in their estate. Well, this is a great vehicle in order to accomplish that. Now, we say living benefits, right? The standby survivorship trust, we talked about that survivorship policy. Living benefits aren't available until when? Until the first spouse passes away, right? In the spousal lifetime access trust, all right, you have, now, this policy is going to be on June's life, right? June is not the beneficiary. Her husband, Tom, is. Okay? So, when there's a living benefit, when there's chronic illness or terminal illness or something like that, and you want to trigger those living benefits, can we do that? Well, as long as the trust has specific language that the trustee can do that, we can do that, right? And now when we get those living benefits, what's going to happen with those living benefits? How can June take advantage of that? Well, she's married to Tom, right? So Tom is the beneficiary of that trust, will receive those living benefit proceeds for the benefit of June. So if June has to go into some long-term care facility, right, it costs a lot of money, we can trigger those living benefits. Tom will receive those living benefits via the trust, and then he can pay for June's medical expenses and her care. Right, so we have access to that, but that is removed, that value of that life insurance is removed from their estate. So again, what do we have? Flexibility. We overcome the objection of control. We have access to the trust assets through the spouse, right? Indirect access. No estate inclusion for either spouse. Important. And we're planning for the sunset. Because again, in this case, it is a very large life insurance policy that they own, and that exemption goes from 13 to 7 million. We have an estate issue. But if we have this plan in place, there is no issue in the event of the sunset. Real simple strategy. Again, you have to involve an attorney. You need an attorney. So flexibility, access, okay, no state inclusion. Let's talk about those filthy, stinking rich people, right? The ones we all want to get our hands on, right? The ones that we all want to sell that big, huge life insurance policy to. Well, the time is running out. There's this big, huge coupon, right? Today, that coupon has an expiration date. The coupon is worth $13.99 million. All right? And they can take advantage of it today. All they have to do is make a gift of $13.99 million to an irrevocable trust, give up control over it, okay? And leave it for the benefit of their children or their spouse or someone else, okay? But they can reduce their estate by $14 million. If they wake up January 1st of 2026 and we have a sunset, that coupon expired. They can no longer use that $13.99 million. Now the coupon is worth only $7 million. So there's a big advantage now for those people that are looking to make large gifts between now and the end of the year, or now between now and the next passage of legislation. I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's a great way for them to start saving today and start using that. All right, and they would create an irrevocable life insurance trust. They would make that gift, and then they would fund a life insurance policy for the benefit of their spouse or their children with respect to that. Now, this doesn't happen a lot, but those opportunities are out there to talk to those individuals. And FYI, you don't have to use the $13.99 million, but my recommendation would be that you have to at least use as much as what we think the exemptions would go down to. So if you used, let's just say you use $7 million of that, and when sunset happens, and it goes down to $7 million, well, you no longer have any more exemptions. Right? But if you use, like, say, $10 million of this, That's okay, they're not gonna claw back the other $3 million. You use 10 million of the 13th, you're still in a better situation in that case. So irrevocable trust, somebody in this room has to have sold a life insurance policy in irrevocable trust, right?
Yes.
Show of hand, okay, good. They're not necessarily that complicated, but again, the purpose is to create that liquidity event to pay for that estate tax. I want to talk to you about, for a second here, qualified plans. What is the worst asset to own, okay, if you have an estate tax issue? It's a qualified plan. And why do I say that? Because you ever hear the thing, qualified plans, if you have an estate tax issue, they're taxed like 70%. Right? So when I inherit my parents' IRA, right, it's worth $1 million. It's really, if they have an estate tax issue, it's only worth about $300,000 to me. Why? Because I have to take distributions. I have to pay my income tax on that, right? And if I'm in the 39% tax bracket, I'm paying 39%. But that asset is also included in my parents' estate, right? So they had to pay another 40% on top of that, right? So it's one of the worst assets to die with, right, if you have an estate tax issue. And, you know, these final regulations, anybody familiar with the final regulations that came out with qualified plans, IRAs, RMDs? Okay. Well, if you have someone that owns an individual retirement account, IRA, or qualified plan, and they name or they're going to pass it eventually down to their children, and they reach the R&D stages, you no longer have this stretch IRA strategy anymore, where you could leave it to your beneficiary and they can stretch it out over their life expectancy. That's gone. Those days are over. All right. The IRS issued a couple years ago new R&D rules with respect to those beneficiary designations, and now you have to exhaust that qualified plan account for 10 years. All right? And the thinking was that, hey, listen, if my parents were in RMD stage, I could take that qualified plan and I could wait until the 9 years, 364 days, and then take a lump sum. So I could let it grow tax deferred for 9 years and then take a huge lump sum. Well, the IRS just came down with final regulations saying you can't do that. You have to take RMDs over a 10-year period of time and exhaust it. So they're forcing that money out. They're forcing the tax on that money because why? The government needs it, right? The government needs it, right? So when I'm talking about qualified plans, I know in this room, people in this room have clients or will meet prospects that have large qualified plan accounts. When I say large, $1 million, it could be 500 that they don't need. And the reason why they don't need that money is maybe because you've offered them some other retirement planning solutions, or maybe through their work they're receiving a pension, that they don't need that IRA, right? And I call those legacy assets. When you have a qualified plan like an IRA, that's a legacy asset that those individuals don't need, right, to live off of in their retirement. And they want to do something with that, and that is earmarked for their children. Is there a better way to pass it to their children than just waiting for their death and passing it? The answer is yes. And it does involve life insurance. Okay? It does involve life insurance. So there's two options, right? For those individuals that have those legacy assets. They can do nothing. If they do nothing, they just wait until they turn 73 or 75. They start taking their RMDs. No one wants to take RMDs. How many in this room have clients that are taking RMDs? So every year when they have to take it, are they happy or are they pissed? They don't want to take it. They don't want it, but they're forced to take it. Okay? So the question is, do they take it today or do they wait until they turn 73? If it's an asset they don't need, they're probably going to wait until they turn 73. Right? When they start taking those RMDs, if they don't need the money, maybe they set up a brokerage account. They start reinvesting that money back into the market, maybe conservatively, maybe aggressively. I don't know. Option 2 is take IRA distributions today, right? As long as they're over 59.5. Right? Because you don't want the 10% penalty, but there is this 72T distribution that you can take below 59.5, and not pay that penalty. Alright, so I'm looking at this target market for this legacy IRA concept is anywhere between, I would say, 55 at the youngest. Alright, but they take distributions today, they pay the tax today. They pay the tax today, and they pay it when they start taking RMDs. Okay, they're gonna pay it anyways. And if they wait longer, those RMDs might be a little bit bigger, and therefore those tax liabilities are gonna be a little bit bigger. All right, so option one, doing nothing, no change. So if we had an individual that owned a $1 million IRA, you can print this kind of small, so I'll read some of this. So you have a 60-year-old individual with $1 million IRA. The IRA earns 4% a year. Distributions are taxed at 25%. The taxable reinvestment, okay, after they receive those distributions instead of a brokerage account, is 3% after tax. RMDs were taken at the beginning at age 75 in this example, okay? And we're assuming that all the figures you can see are year-end figures, year-end. So, you saw the beneficiary's age at the age of 50 when they passed away. The value to their son, Joe, was $2.1 million, let's call it. Now, Joe didn't need those funds right away. He wanted to wait 10 years, right? Didn't want to take those RMDs. And so he left them in there, and at the end of 10 years, that value of that IRA was almost $2.4 million. Now he's got to take a lump sum, he's got to pay taxes on that. On option two, which is let's start taking distributions today. It's the same $1 million account, it earns 4%, distributions are taxed at 25%, after tax grows at 3%, but we purchase an IUL policy, the female in this case, because it was the mother, non-smoker, annual premiums for $92,000 a year. We purchased a $1.5 million IUL with option B increasing, and we assume 10 years of out-of-pocket premium payments. So, look at this. Joe, when he inherits, right, when mom passes away at the age of 80, what does he inherit at the age of 50? $3 million. That's almost a $900,000 difference. Pretty significant. If he waited and let that money grow because he didn't need it, because he was still working and he wanted to save for his retirement, he let that money grow at 4%, that money would be worth $4.1 million as opposed to $2.4 million. Pretty good strategy in my book when you have a legacy asset that's earmarked for your children and is a way in order to do this. Now you can do this with 2 beneficiaries, 3 beneficiaries. This could be a $500,000 policy, just do the math. Cut it in half, it's $500,000. You can still do this with those individuals with a $500,000 qualified plan account. So I'm going to wind down. Any questions on that strategy? Question, go ahead.
On the left-hand side earlier, option 1, when you had RD distribution at age 75,
Yes.
I thought RD distribution starts 73.
Well, in this case, because of the age, it depends. So we can talk about this later. But it is 73, but it's also 75. Depends on when your birth date was. Depends on when your birthday. In this example, this individual, their birthday was 75 R&D started. Yep. It changed again. If you weren't looking. It changed again. It's 73 for certain people. Back there.
Before 65, now the more than 67 for retirement.
72T, just that's the IRS code section.
Because
So
people
they
leave
can
long
start
term
taking out distributions, you said at age 53 or 55?
Well, you can start taking distributions using a 72T calculation at any age. Okay? Problem is with that is you have to take equal distributions for that many years until you, so it doesn't make any sense because the amount of distributions you take when you are younger is going to be a lot lower. So we would not be able to fund this policy appropriately, all right, maximize it, if we had a younger client. Okay? You know the client. And that's why I say 55, the first 5 years, we can get a significant amount of money out without paying the 10% penalty, right, early withdrawal. But after 5 years, they're gonna be 60. And we don't have to worry about that now. We can take as much as we want from that qualified plan account without paying that penalty, 10%. Does that make sense? Any other questions on that? All right, my time is winding down, but come visit us in the booth. We're out there. We got some great materials for you, but we also have some great fact finders here. Estate planning assessment is a great tool to use when you're sitting down with your clients after you sold them a life insurance policy or during the process of selling them a life insurance policy for whatever reason, or an annuity, or whatever solution you're presenting to your client. It's great consumer pieces in terms of estate planning. I also, in terms of helping you all prospect, I know my group at National Life Group Advanced Sales is really started to focus on what we can do to help you, right? The people that are out in the field who are speaking with these people that need the help, right? How can we help you? Well, our plan is to create more consumer materials, right? So that you can share with your clients and help educate your clients. Because a lot of this is about education. You have to educate your clients. And so we have some really great social media that you can use on Instagram, Facebook, okay, LinkedIn. We also have some really great 1 to 3 minute videos to explain the estate planning, the basics of the estate planning, why you need to have an estate plan. All right, so it will help you prospect and reach more people and solve more problems. I think I've run out of time. I enjoyed my time with you. Like I said, I will be here probably for the next several days until I can